Going forward, I want to welcome Miss Malindi Msoni, the alumni lead, to welcome everyone, and then also to introduce the alumni fellows and speak about the objectives of the webinar. Miss Malindi Msoni, say hi to everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone from Lusaka, Zambia. Thank you, Ms. Duncan, for that warm introduction. I'm the lead of the Agora Sustainable Transport Fellowship Alumni, and it gives me such pleasure to welcome all of you to our very first webinar. This moment is special for us because it reflects how far we've come, not only as individuals who went through the fellowship, but a network of young professionals driven to shape Africa's transportation sector. So last year, 15 of us left our home countries and traveled to Berlin to undergo the Agora Fellowship. We soon realized how transformative the experience was because it was just more than learning. We realized it was a call to action. Once we were equipped with a deeper understanding of what sustainable transport is, we were ready to come home and be at the forefront of driving change in transportation. So the creation of the Agora Fellowship Alumni, and we're very grateful to Agora Fekiyesfende. I hope I got that right. And Geiriseb for supporting us is just an initiative to ensure that we keep that drive alive. And today's webinar in particular is an opportunity for us to reflect on the milestones that African countries have achieved in 2024 in the transportation sector. I can give examples of Ethiopia's ban on importation of ICE vehicles to Dakar's launch of the first all-electric BRT. These achievements are a stark reminder to us as Africans that Africa is not just following the global transport transition, but we are actually leading it. But today's discussion is about the future. It's about looking ahead. So what's next for 2025? How do we build on this momentum, accelerate progress, and drive even greater transformation? You will see that our panel brings together alumni from across the continent to reflect on what's been achieved, to share ongoing efforts, and most importantly, to explore how we can push this momentum further in 2025. And finally, this conversation for us is something deeper than milestones. It's about ensuring that Africa's transport future is shaped by African voices and especially young African voices. We know that we know the challenges because we live them. So because of that, we should be at the center of this transition. And with the knowledge, skills, and networks that we've built through the fellowship, we are ready to drive transport transformation in Africa. So thank you once again for taking the time and being part of this webinar. I invite all of you to pay attention and to participate effectively. I hand over to you, Ms. Duncan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miss Malindi. It was nice to hear from you. We're moving over to Mr. Naville Geiriseb just to give a brief remark about the fellowship. Hi, Naville.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much, Ms. Duncan. Good morning from a cold and sunny Berlin. I am so happy to be here and to speak on behalf of Agora Verkehrswende. This journey began 3 years ago, in fact, before my time at Agora, where GIZ initiated a self-funded project called the Rethinking Transport Project, along with Agora Verkehrswende. And the main aim of this project really was to create a network of individuals and organizations that are passionate about sustainable transport on the continent and to drive the decarbonization of the transport sector forward along with achieving net zero mobility on the continent. And really the main goal was and is still to promote collaboration not only between the global north and south, but also provide platform where young professionals that are represented here today, the alumni, as well as organizations can come together and collaborate in this common purpose and goal. So with that being said, as Ms. Msoni mentioned, The fellowship program was then launched as part of a capacity building initiative early last year. And we welcomed 15 fellows at the time, now alumni, in 2 successful rounds here in Berlin, all of course representing a diverse spectrum of disciplines in the transport sector. And we were truly inspired by all the concepts and ideas that you were able to co-create with German and international experts here during your time in the fellowship. And of course, today we are excited then to hear from you as alumni on some of the reflections over the past year and some insights that you have in terms of how can Africans and Global North also collaborate to move forward in terms of transport transition and transformation on the continent. The issue of climate change is not unique to one individual country. Europe cannot achieve transport or climate neutrality on its own without leaving developing countries behind. So all of us need to hold hands and move forward together. And it's important that we raise these discussions on the continent and bring the discourse of transport transformation to decision makers. So in this regard, we are very happy and proud of the alumni for organizing this very first inaugural webinar, which we hope is one of many. And I would like to congratulate the alumni once again for hosting this webinar and to realizing this dream of creating a network of like-minded individuals and organizations promoting sustainable transport on the continent and indeed making this a reality. So I look forward to today's discussions and to learning some insights from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Geiriseb. It's nice to hear from you once more. For those of us joining us now, you can introduce yourself or give your compliments with the chat box and tell us where you're listening in from. It's been nice for us to meet you all. So now we're moving forward to the panel discussion. But before we get to the panel discussion, just a little bit of background of what has been happening and the key highlights of 2024 when it comes to transport transformation. We had Ms. Msoni talk about the ban on internal combustion engines vehicles in Ethiopia. And also, we recently you heard about the Kigali taking a major step by banning all ICE motorcycles. Kenya has taken the bull by the horn in terms of electrifying their bus manufacturing, and then you can see Senegal and South Africa also not left behind. Additionally, Zambia has also signed an MOU with DRC and US for battery manufacturing of EVs. And then also you can see Nigeria also introducing import waivers for EVs, just the same as Zambia. So a lot is happening. These are some of the highlights of what had happened in 2024. Part of this, the objective of this webinar, as said by both Mr. Geiriseb and Ms. Malindi, is that we want to see what will happen, what can we plan for 2025 for transport transformation. So going further, I would want to introduce our panelists. We have a diverse set of panelists from across Africa. They will be the ones to introduce themselves and then tell you a bit about themselves. So Ms. Hilda, Nathaniel, can you just tell us about yourself, a brief background about what you do, your work in the transport sector? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Duncan, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm greeting you all from Windhoek, Namibia. My name is Hilda Nathaniel, as was introduced. I am the coordinator for the Smart Cities and Transport Division in the city of Windhoek. So my role is basically to make sure that people who are unable to afford cars and who are also sometimes unable to afford public transport, such as buses and transport, that they are catered for, that their needs are catered for. So we are advocating and creating awareness on their needs within the city of Windhoek. And currently, we are also busy with our first walking and cycling lane here in the city of Windhoek. So that is pretty much, what I do. Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you so much, Hilda. It's nice to hear from you. And next on the panel, we have Mr. Spencer Taylor.
Thank you, Ms. Duncan. Hi, everyone. So my name is Spencer Estilo Jr. from Liberia. I am a climate change and sustainable development specialist by background, but I have a deep interest in sustainable transport. So I currently serve as the director of the Division of Climate Change and Environment at the Ministry of Transport in Liberia. And basically, this division is responsible to lead efforts and implement actions and measures that aim to shift development priorities of Liberia's transport sector toward a low carbon, smart, inclusive, and resilient system. So amongst other things, we are currently working on the partnership project called LEAP, the acronym for Leapfrogging to E-Mobility Acceleration Project, in collaboration with private sector stakeholders. And the main goal of this project is to develop a complementary and integrated zero emissions vehicle policy that will promote EV adoption and fill the gaps that are not being treated by our current transport policies. So we are currently collecting data and conducting a series of consultation and stakeholder engagement workshops that will help us gather relevant inputs to inform our policy development. So basically, that's who I am and what I do. Thank you very much. Over to you, Byencit.
Thank you so much, Mr. Taylor. That's great work you're doing over there. So I'm going to move over to Ms. Hend Tabey.
Thank you, Byencit. Happy to be here with all of you today. This is Hend Tabey from Cairo, Egypt. My focus is project management and stakeholder engagement and coordination. I work for a strategic consultancy called Transport for Cairo. We are a team composed of 4 different labs: data, tech, passenger information, and research. We are a small team, about 12 full-time employees with multidisciplinary backgrounds from architecture to economics, political studies, and computer science, but all with the same goal to transform transport. We work with international organizations, government authorities, and private sector with the goal, again, to transform transport. We work across all passenger public transport modes. So we're currently working on a pilot implementation project for e-buses in Cairo. We work on a research for how capacity development affects the decarbonization process of transport. And these kinds of things. So we do research, we provide quality data, and we provide passenger information systems as well. So happy to be here with you today. Back to you, Byencit.
Thank you so much, Ms. Tabey. It's great work you're doing over there. It's nice to see a combination of a lot of discipline just to push forward transport. That's good to hear from you. Last but not the least, we have Mr. Paschal Giki.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Paschal Giki. I'm based in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. I work as a mobility consultant. By profession, I'm a civil engineer, but I've been mainly working on mobility policy research and transport data analysis. I also work with the FEMA, the African Mobility Alliance. With the FEMA, I have engaged on different mobility projects, such as developing the first UNEP EV Readiness Index for Africa in 2023. I also participated in mapping of electric mobility companies in Africa, whereby we identified more than 200 companies, and we keep data. It's a very ongoing work and active one, where we identify like where these companies are established, the number of electric vehicles they have sold, their business models, and everything in between. So it was a nice opportunity for me to engage with different mobility companies across Africa. On a national level, I worked as a research fellow with the Urban Living Lab Center under the Solutions First project, where I coordinated implementation of different business models in Dar es Salaam, piloting different use cases of electric vehicles. And also currently, of course, I'm working with the Ministry of Transport as a working group member, where we are developing national electric mobility policies, which is on a draft stage, and hopefully before the end of the year, it's going to be approved. Yeah, thanks, Byencit.
Thank you so much, Mr. Giki. It's interesting to know that we have over 200 electric mobility companies and startups in Africa. That's impressive, right? Wow, great work you're doing there. We look forward to that report. by the end of the year. We'll keep an eye out for that. So with this, we're going to move into the discussion proper. To our participants, if you have questions, don't forget to use the Q&A chat icon to post your questions. If you have comments, you can put your comments on the chat and we'll read that out. Miss Hilda, Nathaniel, I understand that you do a lot around sustainable mobility. So what sustainable mobility solution is Namibia advancing that other African countries can adopt?
Thank you very much. Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, so for the city of Windhoek, particularly, we are really giving more emphasis right now on our people who are walking and people who are cycling. So our main focus is the non-motorized transport users. So in 2018, the city of Windhoek developed the Sustainable Urban Master Plan, the SUTMP, of which the NMT was quite a big focus for the city of Windhoek. So then after that, we have been looking, first of all, we've been doing small work, whereby we also had one of our first cycling lanes, just trying out. We've piloted a few projects. We have done the electric bikes for Windhoek, whereby we gave 40 electric bicycles to students just to get a feel of how does the electric bike then differ from a normal bicycle. We've also trained students within Windhoek in the universities, and then we have also given them bicycles just so that they are able to move around, so that they are mobile within town, and not necessarily only between school and home, but all over town. And so then we thought about it, and the city of Windhoek then realized that for the people to move around, for the non-motorized transport users, then we also needed to look into our infrastructure, which was non-existent. So then the city of Windhoek, together with the German government, we were able to get a grant of 11 million euro, of which now that is one of our biggest projects that we are focusing on right now, which is the implementation then of our first 60-kilometer cycle lane in the city of Windhoek. So the project has been going well so far. We just completed the feasibility study, of which we then looked at the socio-economic aspects of the project. We looked at the environmental aspect of the project. We were also trying to see how will this project then also benefit our environment. As Naville said, it's not only the call to zero emission is not one-sided, it's for everybody, and we are also playing our part then in that project. And so yeah, we have also started looking into electric buses for the city of Windhoek. So we are trying different approaches, but the point of the matter is we're trying to cater for everybody within the city of Windhoek, those who can afford cars and those who cannot afford cars. Yes, pretty much.
Thank you very much. I mean, Namibia is doing great things there, but I'm going to also throw the question to the other panelists. I mean, we have diverse panelists. We have people from Liberia, we have Tanzania, and we are from Egypt. So what are those innovations? What are those things that you are doing within your countries that you think other African countries can adopt? I'll start with Paschal, and then we'll come back.
Yeah, sure. So one thing which I do think it's very much needed at the moment in regarding to sustainable transport in Africa is public transport. So Tanzania has made some big steps. So for people who have been in Dar es Salaam in the past 2 months, they may actually be surprised because there is construction happening everywhere of BRT roads. So currently we do have like one phase of the BRT which is operational, so which is good news. The second one is finished, and we are hoping for the third up to the fifth phase are going to be electric, learning from what is being done in Dakar, Senegal. So that's something which I do think it's very much needed, and also not just building BRT or like mass transit, but also considering the sustainability aspects of them. So for example, we also do have SGR, which is electric. So the government also is considering integration of those modes, you know, for example, having multimodal journey planning for the BRT, the SGR, And also there has been initiatives like the Solutions Plus, which I have mentioned, of trying to also consider the last mile aspect of these modes of transport. Like how can they be electrified by integrating them with electric motorcycles and electric three-wheelers. Three-wheelers are very popular in Dar es Salaam, by the way. So yeah, I do believe those considerations could be beneficial in other cities. Public transport and also electrification of the last mile aspect of the public transport.
All right, thank you, Paschal, bringing in the last mile perspective into the discussion. Ms. Tabey.
Actually in the context of Egypt, we had a pilot project in downtown Cairo with, I think, 25-kilometer bicycle lanes. It had its downs, but now it's having its ups again. And also we implemented, as we hosted COP27 here in Sharm el-Sheikh, we implemented as well a cycle lane to the venue. So those were a good kickstart. And right now we have multiple mass transit projects, rail mostly. And the government is now really interested about first and last mile solution. And that's actually a huge step ahead to have the government thinking about first and last mile solutions. So I am hopeful and I foresee a good actually NMT future from the perspective of the infrastructure and the perspective of multimodality. So yeah, that's on my end in Egypt. Thank you. Back to you, Byencit.
Thank you, Ms. Tabey. And Mr. Taylor?
Okay, so yes, I will be quick on that. So for the government of Liberia, we are really basically, looking into public transport. Our active transport is yet still in the embryonic stage. Okay, so the government of Liberia is actually expanding her public transport routes. Okay, and increasing the number of buses to serve people who are, who really do not have, access to passenger cars. Okay, so right now the government of Liberia is only looking forward to establishing and forwarding and expanding the buses routes for public transport, but active transport, which considers including bicycle lanes, are really still in the early stage. So yeah, public transport is what we are looking at currently. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if I get all correctly, we are looking at last mile and public transport to drive the transport transformation across Africa. Okay, so off the back of that, Mr. Taylor, what crucial policy interventions are essential to facilitate a just transition to sustainable mobility across Africa?
Thank you again, Byencit, for the great question. So to really respond to this question, I would first like to remind us and re-emphasize that transitioning to sustainable transport is not only about moving to electric vehicles. Okay, sustainable transport transition is a holistic and all-inclusive paradigm shift from a fossil fuel-driven form of transport to a variety of cleaner alternatives, including public and active transport. Let's think walking and cycling. So there was a series of research done on various transport policies across Africa that revealed that the coexisting national transport policy frameworks of several African countries, including my country, Liberia, were more or less equated to infrastructural policies. They really tend to focus primarily on road constructions and upgrade. So even though those policies undoubtedly contributed to socioeconomic growth and enhanced accessibility, they often overlook the broader climate, health, and environmental objectives that were necessary to complete the full sustainability triangle. So this gives me the clues and confirm the fact that there is no one-size-fits-all to our transport challenges. Okay, so for our nations like Liberia, Sierra Leone, and other countries that are yet in the early stages of the transition, I think we should be looking at developing a comprehensive policies, or trying to recalibrate our existing policies so that it holistically integrates all aspects of transport, energy, and the climate agenda, all right, that will transform our entire transport sector. And these policies are similarly being done by countries like Ethiopia, Morocco, Rwanda, and a few others. So to build this policy framework and for these frameworks to actually deliver and connect all the corners of the sustainable transport triangle, we have to look at and consider a few fundamental pillars. All right, those policies have to support the shift away from private car dependency toward public transport, cycling, and walking. All right, those policies also will have to set clear targets for the gradual phase out of internal combustion engine vehicles while promoting cleanup fuels and incentivizing adoption of electric vehicles and other fuel vehicles. And finally, it is important that those policies that we are looking to develop should also ensure that low-income communities and vulnerable groups are not disproportionately burdened during the transition process. So yes, I believe that if these policies are built and developed on these pillars, there will be a vital transformation for Africa's transport sector. Thank you. Over.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Taylor, for that. I mean, this transport transformation thing, it cannot really thrive without proper planning and policy interventions placed on ground. And I know that I can see that Ms. Eltaba would want to comment on that. So, Ms. Eltaba, you can comment on that and also speak on how can cities transition towards more regulated off the back of the policy intervention that Spencer spoke, more regulated, efficient, and sustainable systems?
Honestly, I have a question to Mr. Taylor other than a comment. He mentioned challenges faced at early stages. So in your opinion, Mr. Taylor, what immediate actions should governments prioritize to build momentum for long-term policy shifts?
Spencer, you're muted in case you're speaking.
I'm sorry, I forgot. So yes, in the case of Liberia, I think basically we to consider a full shift, especially in where we are looking at shifting to EVs currently, we should start looking at providing fiscal incentives. All right, our government should introduce tax rebates for EVs purchase and to reduce fees for EV registration and investment credit for businesses that are currently engaging in expanding our charging infrastructure. I think by doing that, we will encourage a lot of people, a lot of businesses to try to upskill their businesses, and more people will start to look in towards transitioning now to sustainable transport, especially in the EV sector.
Okay, thank you so much, Spencer, for giving that answer. So, Ms. Eltaba, have you spoken?
I was just saying thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so moving forward, Mr. Paschal, Giki, what practical steps can African nations take to standardize regulations when it comes to charging infrastructure and cross-border transition?
Yeah, so Spencer has already mentioned national mobility policies are very much needed, for our governments to have clear targets on what needs to be done, like within the countries themselves. But if we act on independently, then it really leads to having fragmented policies and also practices across African countries. As you already know, our countries are very much connected. So for example, we have economic blocks like the EAC, ECOWAS, SADC, and the likes who have common tariffs, right? So when it comes to import tariffs, for example, I'll give an example of EAC. So in EAC, there are common import tariffs, but we see that different countries like Kenya and Uganda has tax exemptions when you are importing electric motorcycles, but Tanzania doesn't. And most of these imports might be coming from the Dar es Salaam port. So it kind of like creates friction when doing businesses. So I do think these incentives or policies should be considered or discussed on the regional blocks level, so that it kind of creates harmony when the countries are doing businesses, so that it also becomes easier for companies, let's say, which are in Uganda to scale their operations to Kenya or Tanzania, and the same also for ECOWAS or SADC countries. And another thing which is very much needed is having HS codes. So HS codes are different ways on how products are identified, specifically during importation or for taxing purposes. But you find that the electric mobility system or sustainable transport, it's evolving very quickly. So our government and also regional blocks need to keep up with the HS code. So for example, in Tanzania, there are currently no HS codes for electric tuk-tuk, even though there is a very big number of electric three-wheelers, like startups and also the vehicles themselves in the country. So currently, they're imported on the same HS codes as bicycles. So that really becomes hard to introduce certain incentives or policies which are specifically targeting that particular aspect of vehicles. So, and the other thing is the standardization, but this one is a tricky one because if you standardize on an industry which is evolving so quickly, like a sustainable transport or electric mobility in particular, then really it might hinder innovation. So a better approach will be to offer guidelines. So for example, EPRA, rather than standardizing charging infrastructure and swapping stations, they introduced guidelines and regulations on how the charging station should communicate with the grid. So that's something which also other countries could follow suit. Yeah, that's it from my side, Byencit.
All right, thank you so much, Paschal, Giki. Any of the panelists want to also comment on that question? Hilda, you want to comment on that?
No, I think I just wanted to, I think just when Hend asked Spencer, like regarding the challenges, then I was also just thinking perhaps one of the challenges that we are not, I'm not sure, but it comes up a lot, especially in our context, that we also have a lack of human resources, especially like people who are a bit well vested in electric vehicles and that. And I think that is also one of the things why we, appreciating platforms such as Agora, and also just to engage with people who have, who are coming from areas where this has been done before. I'll give a typical example. We also, like, together with the Geiriseb, we also got assistants, like personnel who are coming to help us with our projects, such as the bike share system that we also want to start here in the city of Windhoek. But because of lack of knowledge and just even like just with starting with policies and that, we could not start in the past, but now we're actually starting. So just one of the challenges I remembered when Hend was asking Spence, the lack of human resource.
Thank you so much, Hilda. I can see Hend nodding her head. So Hend, given we hear about informal transport and remains dominant in many African cities, so how can these cities transition towards more regulated, efficient, and sustainable systems?
Okay. First of all, I prefer using the term popular transport instead of informal transport. So popular transport aren't just a set of fragmented, unregulated services. They form a very critical part of urban mobility that keeps our cities moving. Estimates showed about that 70% of the route-based trips in the global south are done using popular transport. And as professionals in the sector say, and I quote, popular transport, while strongly present on the street, is often absent from planning, policy, and projects. This absence isn't because these services are not needed, they are. It's because they are not properly measured, understood, or integrated in our official transport and climate strategies. So maybe taking the context of the Greater Cairo region as an example, popular transport accounts for about 63% of daily public transport trips. This means that majority of people rely on it, yet we often lack the basic data of routes, ridership, or operations. And actually, the share, so the 63% thing is from 2014, so it's very outdated. And you can't improve what you don't measure. So without data, cities struggle to plan effectively, leaving popular transport disconnected from the broader mobility strategies. This only does not lead to inefficiencies, but also weakens efforts to decarbonize the transport sector. As these services continue operating without the necessary investments to improve quality, efficiency, and their sustainability. And in that sense, a great example of the 2024 achievements and the vision for 2025, the global NDC template for popular transport, which is the nationally determined contributions. Right now, governments are preparing to submit theirs, the updated national determined contributions to the UNFCCC. But in most cases, popular transport is completely missing from the climate action plans. So recognizing these gaps, we as CFC teamed up with the Global Network for Popular Transport in Costa Rica and TUMI, the Transformative Urban Mobility Initiative in Germany, to address this. We worked with around 20 transport and climate experts from across the world. The aim was very clear. It was to provide a structured way for governments to incorporate popular transport in their climate commitments. So that starts with data collection and then with governments actually recognizing popular transport operators as key stakeholders in the mobility planning, and with policies that do not just regulate popular transport, but actually support these systems. So, and when we talk about transitioning to cleaner transport, we need to be thinking about a just transition, one that ensures electrification and other improvements do not come at the cost of the livelihoods of drivers and workers, but instead enhance the services for both them and passengers. So maybe I can wrap up with, at the end of the day, popular transport is not a temporary workaround. It's a permanent and vital part of the urban mobility. If we are serious about sustainable and efficient transport systems, we have to stop treating it as an afterthought and start integrating it into the future of our cities. And again, as one of the community says, and I quote, your cities will always grow faster than the formal transport will reach. So I can stop here and over to you, Byencit.
Interesting. I mean, the room is getting hotter with a lot of information flying around. Just a message to our participants. Don't forget, if you have questions, you can just drop it on using the Q&A icon on the chat box, and then also you can give your comments using the chat box. So I hear Hend talking about electrification, building the system. So Mr. Taylor, what role can decentralized off-grid renewable energy solutions play in accelerating the adoption of sustainable transport systems in both rural and urban settlements? Because I also heard Ms. Tabey talking about the systems, urban systems and rural systems. So how can we do that?
Thank you again, Byencit, for your thoughtful follow-up question. So basically, when we consider the adoption of sustainable transport, particularly in regions where that struggle with consistent electricity access, off-grid renewable energy and decentralized renewable energy solutions can emerge as that transformative force, all right, and a big game changer. So let's take, for instance, solar energy, all right? It can be deployed practically anywhere, even in the most remote areas where the national grid fails to reach. So for initiatives that are currently ongoing in places, in countries around West Africa, for instance, take the Solar Home Initiative, they are paving the way for and providing solar power solutions that can be harnessed to power our EV stations. So imagine having decentralized charging points for electric vehicles strategically placed in rural communities. That is not only going to alleviate the range anxiety that most of our people who purchase EVs will have, all right? It will also significantly contribute to a more inclusive mobility ecosystem, okay? And another thing that this decentralized and off-grid renewable energy solutions can bring is that it's going to help us reduce the operating cost of our electric vehicles. Since solar energy and wind energy tends to be very cheaper than the conventional electricity grid. This is not only going to promote energy independence, which is vital for energy security, but it's also going to help us lower our reliance on imported fossil fuel. Okay, so yeah, the bottom line is clear. If we leverage the off-grid renewable energy solutions, again, it can be a very big game changer in not just enhancing our mobility, but also promoting economic growth and environmental sustainability. So yeah, of course, off-grid and decentralized solutions can be a very big player in this transition. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Spencer. I mean, I hear a lot around homegrown, around working around what we have and using the resources we have on ground. Of that, Mr. Paschal Giki, would you help us, like, what incentives should be prioritized to support homegrown sustainable transport innovations?
Yeah, so when we talk about sustainable transport, mainly it goes back to the companies and the consumers. But the ones who are facing the critical challenges are the companies, you know, like how to reach the market, and also to come up with innovative business models. So take an example of e-buses. E-buses are very expensive, so it's really not easy to just sell it as a normal diesel bus. You need to come up with some innovative business model like what Paschal is doing. So those are kind of stuff which the companies can do, but they can't do it alone. They need to get some support from the government, which could come in terms of incentives. And one of them is import duties. So most of the time, the vehicles which are being sold in Africa are used vehicles, and used vehicles are usually very cheap. And the electric vehicles which are mainly being sold at the moment in comparison are new vehicles. So it's not just you're not just competing with new diesel vehicle VS, like a new electric vehicle. You are competing with used diesel vehicles. So the government needs to have some incentives, such as import duties, in order to lower down the prices or the purchase prices of the vehicles. And of course, we have seen already lots of governments in Africa are trying to come up with some ways of implementing this policy, and very good or very early examples are Rwanda, and also, of course, Kenya followed suit, and Uganda also, Malawi, and so many other African countries are trying to see if that could work. And another thing is corporate taxes. So usually when you are running an e-mobility company at the beginning, it's very expensive, and taxes eat a very big chunk money, like a very big chunk of the money of the profit, which goes to the companies. In some countries, up to 30% of the profit. In some countries, probably even more. So if that somehow it could be considered by the governments. So some governments actually already do have incentives on, they call them critical industries, where companies are given tax exemptions for a certain duration when they get established, maybe like 5 to 10 years. So if also sustainable transport could be considered as a critical sector, then it could really be beneficial. And another thing which I do think it's also very essential is non-physical incentives to both the companies and also the users. So for the companies, it could include something like free public land for charging infrastructures, which are going to be used for public purposes. Because at the end of the day, this, the charging infrastructures are no different from electricity poles, for example, which in most cases, the electricity distribution companies are given to them for free. So if also that thing could, some sort of PPP between the government and the e-mobility companies, it could really benefit and help with the kickoff of the introduction of charging infrastructures. And for the users is, like incentives like maybe free parking stations, having specific plate numbers for the electric vehicles so that they could be easily identified or given privileges on the roads, and so and so. Back to you, Byencit.
Interesting. Finding out about the taxing systems and how we can help the manufacturers and also the consumers to lower the high cost of these vehicles is really important. So thank you so much to our panelists. Like, they've dispensed quite a lot of knowledge, and I can see a lot of questions buzzing. We'll soon be heading to the Q&A, but before we go, we still need a little bit more from the wealth of knowledge that our panelists have. So I'm about to throw a general question to every person, every of the panelists. So if you are to advise the city government on one critical action, just one, for 2025, what will it be and why would you be advising that? So, I'm going to start with the ladies. We are gender balance. So, I'll start with Miss Tabey, and then Paschal Giki can go next. Then we'll now have Hilda, and then Mr. Taylor can go last. So let's hear from you.
I heard today people commenting on the capacities or the skill staff existent to actually implement the current projects. So I would definitely say to invest significantly in capacity development efforts. By doing so, we can collectively shape a sustainable transport future that is not only achievable, but also resilient. So maybe decision makers have to recognize that transport decarbonization is not merely an infrastructure challenge, but a holistic undertaking requiring a comprehensive capacity development approach. Thus, I would recommend that at least during the annual planning stage, maybe transport institutions embed structured capacity needs assessment, an assessment to find out what their current capacities are versus what they want to actually achieve in order to then identify the capacity gap and to design and plan ways to address and close this gap. So by developing their needed capacities, they would be able to successfully plan, design, and implement sustainable transport projects. I stop here. Back to you, Byencit.
Thank you so much, Mr. Giki.
Yeah, so for me, as I mentioned in my introduction, and also something which align with what Hilda has commented earlier, it's last mile, like electrification and considering sustainability of last miles. I'll give you some data. So for example, in Tanzania alone, 2 and 3 wheelers makes up to 80% of the fleet of vehicles. And I'm very sure there are more numbers of 2 and 3 wheelers in Dar es Salaam than the 4 wheelers, and they move even more people. So it's a sector which, once it's electrified or somehow considered as a holistic on how it could be made sustainable, it really help us to reach our NDC goals of reducing CO2 emissions and other greenhouse gases emissions. That's it from me. Byencit.
Thank you so much, Paschal. Hilda, Miss Hilda.
I think if I can give advice, it will honestly be to look into or to put effort in sourcing funding. Yeah, to source funds to then transform the transport system in our countries, because I think one of the challenges that we are also facing is, I think, is African countries. Maybe I'm speaking for myself, for Namibia in specific, is the lack of funding. We do not have funding to research, to collect data, to implement, and really just to do the things that we really want to do in the city, to be able to enable everyone to be mobile. So we are constrained with funds, and therefore we are not doing a holistic approach. We can only do so little because of the limitations. So I think we really need to look into sourcing funding. Yeah.
Okay. Source and funding. That's great. And Mr. Taylor.
Yes, so having commented on all of the other relevant, aspect that we would need as Africa, as a continent to shift towards sustainable transport, maybe in 2025 and beyond. For me, in one line, I would say that we should try to enhance our regional partnership and collaborations, all right, as it relates to facilitating the cross-border trade for our EV components. Okay, so I believe that if we strengthen our partnership and we strengthen cross-border collaboration on the trade and sale of EV components, because I mean, for Liberia, we may have some of those critical materials or critical minerals, that can help, push the sustainable transport transition that other countries may not have. So once we have a holistic framework that and enact a policy that will facilitate our cross-border trade for EV components, I think it will encourage local assembly and actually foster our employment and innovation on the continent. So yeah, regional partnership and collaboration is key. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you, our panelists, for such wealth of knowledge. It's interesting to hear that there are key concepts that keep popping up. We keep hearing funding, we keep hearing capacity building, we keep hearing last mile, we keep hearing incentives. It's interesting to know that these things are coming up in conversations just as we are beginning the year, just so that a lot of attention can be drawn to this and we can see how this can be pushed forward. So I have a lot of questions in the comment session that has been directed to the panelists. So first of those questions, this is addressed to everyone, so any of the panelists can take a jump at it. It says, what innovative strategies can be implemented to transform Africa's transformation infrastructure to enhance connectivity, reduce congestion, and promote sustainable development? So any of the panelists can jump on that. Do I repeat the question again? Okay. It says, what innovative strategies can be implemented to transform Africa's transformation infrastructure to enhance connectivity, reduce congestion, and promote sustainable development? So basically, I think what the person is asking is what can be done to enhance connectivity. Also, we know about congestion in most African cities. What can be done to reduce those congestions and also at the same time promote sustainable development? Spencer.
Okay. Yes. So like I intimated in my in the response to the first question, I think we need to invest most appropriately in public infrastructure, in transport infrastructure, okay? With the exception of developing a comprehensive policy, okay? I think we have to invest more in public infrastructure, not forgetting our active mode of transport, developing infrastructure for active mode of transport like walking and cycling, okay? Because and then these comprehensive policies that we will be developing as a country-based or continent-based should, consider, like I said, these three aspects, okay? They should try to support the shift away from private cars car dependency, okay? And to do that, you have to improve your public transport infrastructure. And those policies, again, we have to set clear targets, all right, to, to help us phase out ICE vehicles, okay? And yeah, so once we have a comprehensive policy that will holistically look at all of these things while taking into consideration our all modes of transport, our energy and climate goals, I believe that, yeah, we are on the path to, to transport transformation on the continent. Thank you. Over.
Thank you so much, Spencer. Hilda, can see you want to give a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what Spencer had said, like in terms, especially when it comes to congestion, I think that's perhaps the second part of the question, that we needed to invest more in our public transport. So we see, especially with the city of Windhoek, our public transport is not there yet. So we are operating on very old buses that the timetable is not so clear. Sometimes you'll be waiting by the bus stop and then the bus doesn't show up. So which has forced a lot of people then to go and purchase their own vehicle. So in the morning, you get this trend where the road is very much congested. But then if you look in the car, it's basically just one person. So everyone, like a household has maybe 3 cars, one for the mother, one for the father, and then for the children, they also get to drive themselves because our public transport is not there yet. So the discussions have also been there that if we improve our public transport to the point where it comes on time and it's within, let's say, 5 kilometers of walking distances, then that way it will discourage people from everybody owning their own vehicle. But until then, we are going to be faced with an issue where everybody is driving their internal combustion engine vehicle and the roads are congested. So I think we really need to prioritize and put more effort into upscaling and just improving our public transport. I think that would really be a sustainable option for us. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Hilda. Hend, okay, I can see your hand is up, and there's also a question that is directed to you. So, would you want to comment to this before I ask you the question that is directed to you, or I could just ask and you answer both at the same time?
Okay, I just wanted to second what Hilda said, and actually it's the matter of the modal shift from the private vehicles to public transport. It's not only about the shift from ICE to an EV. Yeah, I just wanted to second what Hilda said, and you can direct the question now. Thank you.
Okay, so to Miss Tabey, we are cognizant of the growth of informal settlements in Africa. How do we achieve sustainable transport in such areas with all the complexities involved, like economic complexities, political complexities, and the rest?
Okay, that's an interesting question, and actually will make me come back to what I've discussed on the panel, which is popular transport. Popular transport is basically a demand-responsive mode of transport. So in informal settlements, there is need for people to move from here and there. So actually, other people respond to this need by taking their own cars and actually making profit out of it. So the economic complexity and the political complexity comes where the government now need to actually recognize these operators and include them in the overarching transport planning and take them into account. So there's not much complexity here. It's only a matter of recognizing other than eradicating. So I hope this answers the question.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tabey. Is there anyone that also wants to comment on that question? Or I'm very sure Ms. Tabey has done justice to that, though. Okay, so I have a question here directed to all the panelists. It says, what practices or insights can you share that can be easily adopted to build a competent workforce pipeline for the rapidly growing EV uptake in Africa? So I think this is talking about workforce and capacity building, because I also saw a comment that had to do with building capacity, especially in technical skills and policies. So what practices or insights can you share on how this can be easily be gotten? Paschal?
Yeah, so I will, so mainly for vehicles, specifically electric vehicles, they demand new workforce in terms of repair, maintenance, and also even assembly. So usually it means that they require either retraining of the existing workforce who are working on the ICE vehicles, but that could be tricky because if they're already comfortable with that, whatever work they're doing, then like shifting to something new, which they're not sure of its sustainability, could be really hard. So an easier way, I think, will be to kind of sort of the entire value chain, not like 100%, like, but the most majority of it to kind of shift it and be done locally. So means encouraging for local assembly and also manufacturing, and that could be done by either encouraging foreign investment to do that kind of businesses, and again, go back to the incentives which I mentioned earlier, so that it becomes easier for them to do businesses. And if there are policies in place, then they even get more encouraged and be sure that, okay, whatever they're going to do is going to be sustainable for a long run. And in addition to that, another approach which is currently being done in Tanzania with technical universities and also even universities is introduction of courses which are relevant to the skills which are needed. Some of them are like on a diploma level, even bachelor degree, and some of them are short courses which gives people the skills which are needed, and then once they go back, they're able to do internship with existing mobility companies or even start their own small mechanics shops where they can do businesses. Yeah. Back to you, Aisha.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Giki. That was great insights. I mean, when it comes to capacity building, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I believe that Africa has the competence. We have the resources. We have the human resources to do these things. We just have to invest more in R&D, invest more in training, hands-on training, and also skills transfer from from different sectors to the e-mobility sector and the transport sector. So there's a lot that needs to be done, and we could see that a lot of training are already ongoing within the African continent with regards to technical trainings. We have different organizations handling that. So a lot is being done around capacity building and technical expertise. All right. I have a question to Paschal. Paschal, this question is directed to you. In Ethiopia, I want to know if there are measures to place to ensure technical expertise to help with technical assistance in this region with regards to the ban, and also what are the ways we can ensure that the level of commitment in EV adoption, innovation, infrastructure development is the same with building technical expertise. So this is still the same. This is a 1 or 2 on that.
Okay. So Ethiopia has done very bold moves. Like fully banning of importation of ICE vehicles. And so one thing, like from the outside, it's really you might think that, okay, how is that even possible for an African countries? Because even so many other countries haven't done it, or they're even thinking, okay, are electric vehicles really the future? Or we should keep exploring our natural resources like fossil fuel and so. But Ethiopia, it's really, so for example, in terms of the electricity, or like, okay, what's the reason why we are encouraging usage of electric vehicles? Is because it lowers emission. So for Ethiopia, in terms of electricity, the majority, like up to 99, 100% of the electricity is non-renewable. I mean, it's coming from renewable sources. So that's already a plus. And another thing is Forex. You know, the countries and governments are losing a lot of foreign currency in importing fossil fuel. So if they can do that, it means that the majority of money which was being used to import fossil fuel to run the vehicles is then going to be used, you know, for charging the vehicles, which then the transaction happens in local currency. So it even stimulates the local economy of the countries. So that's really something which it's very essential. But one thing which needs to be done, of course, and companies in terms of local manufacturing, assembly, and also introduction of charging infrastructures, because you find the major challenge for adoption of electric vehicles in African countries is charging infrastructure. And charging infrastructure and the existence of electric vehicles is like a chicken and egg problem. You know, like companies do not want to invest because, okay, who is going to use the infrastructure? It's expensive. How are they going to get their money back? And people do not want to buy the electric vehicles because, again, where are they going to charge their vehicles? What's going to happen if they run out of charge when they're driving on the highway? So having policies, for example, like what's happening in Kenya right now is the government has said, okay, in the highway, every 100 kilometers, we need to have a charging station. And the government needs to actually facilitate to make that happen, either through PPP or having policies and incentives, which then, you know, like motivates companies to implement that. Yeah, back to you, Byencit. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. It's so good to hear from everyone. So we have some people with their hands raised and would want to ask specific questions. So I'll ask that those that their hands are raised can just be brought forward so that they can ask their questions. Okay, so I'm looking, sorry, I'm trying to find those who hands are raised and want to ask questions. Okay. David. I can see David. Okay. So David, you can ask your question. Okay, Grace. Is Grace there? Okay, so it looks like we've lost both of them. So Grace and David, you can unmute your mic and ask your questions. While we wait for that, we have another question in the chat box which says, how do we move to cleaner transport EVs? How do we move to cleaner transport EVs without disrupting the livelihoods of majority of people that are currently employed in the transport sector, knowing that majority of them are from the middle and low income classes? Mr. Spencer, do you want to speak to that?
Please, can you come again with the question?
How do we move to cleaner transport without disrupting the livelihoods of majority of the people that are currently employed in the transport sector, knowing that majority of them are from the middle and lower income classes.
Okay, so yeah, thank you again for your question. So I think one thing that we can do, all right, to have all of this, to have maybe not all, but most of the people come along with the transport transition without, impacting their livelihood or what they do, is to encourage maybe what we talk about capacity building, all right? So once we have the advent of new technology that we want to shift from ICE to EVs, I mean, you have to maybe create and develop some form of capacity building, all right? Have opportunity for these people to learn, all right, how to operate these new technologies, okay? And then you are not leaving any of them behind to join the transport transition, okay? So I believe that capacity building is really key, all right? If we don't intend to leave these people behind or one way or the other have their livelihoods affected, we have to bring them along with the transition by, giving them the relevant skills, by giving them the relevant education and capacity building opportunities that they need. I think with that, yeah, their livelihood will be impacted little or not.
All right, that's a good one. And just to add on what Mr. Spencer has said, if we've all gone listened through what the panelists have been saying, emphasis has been made on capacity building, and the idea is not that cleaner transport is coming to push out the ICE vehicle. It's a transition, and transitions don't just happen immediately. It takes time, it takes process, and part of the process is capacity building. We hear people talking about reskilling, upskilling of people. So these people that are employed by this set of vehicle or set of transport that we're trying to move to a cleaner transport can be upskilled, or they can relearn and unlearn. We can do skill transfers for them, and then because there are quite a lot of opportunities that exist within the cleaner transport system, just as there are opportunities within, quote unquote, the dirty transport systems that we have. So actually, there are employment opportunities for these people. It's not like we're leaving them hanging or making them become more unemployed, but rather we are tagging them along in the transition. Thank you very much. Also, I have another question. This is to everyone. What practices or insights can you share that can be easily adopted to build a competent workforce pipeline for the rapidly growing EV uptake in Africa? What practices or insights can you share that can be easily adopted to build a competent workforce pipeline for the rapidly growing EV uptake in Africa? So, Mr. Giki, I'm very sure this is kind of within your basket to answer.
Yeah, sure. So building workforce pipelines, as we have already mentioned, short courses and training at university levels could something which is very beneficial, and also, of course, technical colleges. So that's something which is very essential. And another thing which we have seen is also being done by different organizations like African NEV and also the African Mobility Alliance, working with TFIs like Geiriseb, UNEP, and UN Habitat, is to train the ICE workforce. So, for example, with the African Mobility Alliance, we've been engaging with the boda riders in Kenya and other African countries, just like train them and tell them how, like, the benefits which they could get from the electric vehicles. You don't need to tell them that, okay, buy it, because then it becomes a promotional, but like more of telling them, okay, these are the benefits, this is how much you are going to save, and also give them the opportunity to test, do like test drives and rides. Then people will be like, oh, okay, I think this is more like what I am used to. So Yeah, so in summary, again, working with organizations to capacity building, introducing short courses and long courses at universities, that's something which could be very beneficial. And also another thing is engaging on a policy level, like having pipelines and policies on how sustainable transport as a whole could be incorporated on sustainable development in the countries.
All right, thank you so much, Pascal. Just also to comment on the trainings, I mean, there are a lot of organizations working to see that this capacity is being built. I know of African NEF who are doing a lot of technical trainings across Africa, not just for men, but also a female part of these trainings, and they are also looking at how they can build this expertise. And we can see other organizations coming up to follow in their footsteps. So we have we have a comment also from Edna saying advanced mobility is also doing training. So we can see how people are coming in to follow in the footsteps of Africa NEF. Thank you so much for that. So we have a few minutes to the end of the webinar for us to let our panelists go. We want to have like a closing statement from each of them. So in your closing statements, I would want to ask a final question, and you can close with that. So looking ahead to 2025, Brian, what are the top 3 game-changing policies or innovations that will accelerate the shift to sustainable transport across the continent? So you could just do that and give us your closing remarks. So I'm going to start with Mr. Taylor.
That again. Okay, so for me, I think on the policy side of things, I think government should consider looking into providing, like I said previously, fiscal incentives, all right, providing tax rebates for, EV purchase, and maybe increasing import taxes on ICE vehicles. Another thing could be developing regulatory standards, okay, having regulatory requirements that will mandate a percentage of new vehicle sales at least to be electric, between giving them a specific time frame, all right, which will significantly accelerate the transition. And another thing could be that government should also look into building partnerships and crafting programs that will provide incentives for, old ICE vehicles like Kenya is doing. All right, I think they have this swapping, the ICE swap to EVs. Okay, so I believe that if our governments can really support the transition in implementing those 3 policy structure, we can safely transition to sustainable transport, in my view. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer. That's quite interesting to know. Ms. Hilda, your closing remark, and then what innovations looking ahead of 2025?
Okay, thank you very much. This is quite very engaging, and also just very important to see what other people are getting up to in their cities. I think before I close off, I just also wanted to, I know there was a question on the training, on how to keep up with the times now that we are going into the electric vehicle and moving away from ICE. I think it's also just very important that we also just keep a lookout for ourselves as well, for our own development. I know what the city of Windhoek does is we have a lot of partnership also with other cities, especially in Germany, which we really try to take advantage of attending training or just requesting them to assist us in certain areas where we are lacking. But yes, following organizations such as the TUMI, the Transformative Urban Mobility Initiatives, I know right now they also have a course on electric buses, which is about to start on the 24th of February. So yeah, let's just be proactive and keep up with the times. I think in terms of the closing remarks, I would definitely put more emphasis on training. I think like Spencer said, put more emphasis on training. I know one of the things that we also learned during our fellowship was that Germany was looking into incentivizing people who were already having ICE vehicles so that maybe they can also retrofit and then change them from ICE. You keep your same car, but then it's no longer ICE, now it's an electric vehicle. So certain things like that, because people are very sentimental to their vehicles as well. And building partnerships, like I said, with the city of Windhoek, we're really taking advantage of that, building partnerships with other cities where we can learn. We call them our sister cities, where we can also visit. You can do like a 2-month visit or something where we just go and learn what are the people doing and how does that apply to you, and how can you come and apply that in your city. Of course, knowing that not every solution is a one size fits all. So you get different solutions and then you can also come and apply it here. And finally, definitely looking into the infrastructure. The city of Windhoek currently, I think we only have 3, speaking under correction, but probably 3 charging stations within the city. Otherwise, if you buy an electric vehicle, then you have to possibly charge it at home. So these are some of the things that we also need to work into, coming up with standards and policies so that every petrol station, for example, also has a charging station for an electric vehicle. So we definitely still have a long way to go, but we are getting there. Yes.
So much, Hilda. I like your last statements. We know where we're going and we are heading there. That's great. Mr. Paschal, Giki.
Yeah, so for me, in terms of closing, I do believe it's very important to have policies and framework in place which guides the country on, like what is the direction and what they want to do in terms of sustainable transport. So per the UNEP EV Readiness Index, more than 21 countries were examined, and those countries, more than 50% of them had some sort of policies or strategies related to electric mobility. So that's something which is already happening, but it could be more beneficial if it gets extended, even on a level of NDCs, like the national determined contributions, and have them as sector specific. So in so many African countries, transport is the major contributor of CO2 emissions. So if there are no specific targets on how much has to be reduced from transport, 5 years is not a long time. 5 years is just, we are there and we haven't reached the target. So I do think it's very essential to have a target, sector-specific targets for the CO2 emissions. And in terms of innovations, to be honest, I'm a really big fan of micromobility, and I do believe it could also, the same way how it has worked in Europe and Asian cities, it could also work with some modifications in African cities. So for example, shared bicycles for last mile transport, even deliveries, those kind of innovations, which I do believe at some point, it has to be implemented in order for our cities to be sustainable or even to actually even move. Yeah, thanks, Ms. Duncan.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Paschal, Giki, and Mrs. Tabey.
I'll try to be very quick in the interest of time. So my main points are, we have to recognize 3 things. The first thing, we have to recognize the popular transport into broader mobility strategies to allocate the necessary investment to improve their quality, efficiency, and sustainability. The second, recognize that transport transformation is not only about infrastructure challenge, it's more of a comprehensive or holistic approach, and it requires a comprehensive capacity development approach to actually get there. And the third, recognize the importance of monitoring and evaluation, so we can actually assess how successful we are in what we implemented on the long run, not only on the short run. So I stop here and back to you, Byencit. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much to our panelists, and thank you to everyone who has stayed with us So it was really an engaging discussions, and look, just a brief summary of what we're looking at ahead of 2025. We can see that fiscal incentives, that's what our panelists has been echoing, tax rebate, increase in taxes, and then we look at partnerships, cross-country partnership, private-public partnerships. Also, we look at developing standard regulations, and then also setting timelines and sticking by those timelines to see that some of these innovations and programs and projects come into place. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. As I said earlier, this is this will be a quarterly webinar, and we'll be having a second webinar by the second quarter. So we're looking at to host this webinar quarterly, and the details about the webinar will be shared. And there's a link on the comment section that you can click and subscribe to our newsletters so that you can be informed about works, projects, and activities that are going to be happening. So thank you, everyone, for joining. This is 2:31 from Nigeria. It's 2:31. We are just 1 minute way over time. We apologize for that. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you to our panelists.